Hello, hello. Hopefully you can hear me okay. So yesterday we talked about biomes, and we talked about how some prefixes that A means not or without, photo means light, phyto means plant, and ic means having to do with. So photic means having to do with light. Aphotic means having to do with no light or having to do without light. And we talked about how ecosystems are all the living and non-living things, but a biome is similar ecosystems with the same general abiotic factors. They may not be the exact same species, but they're similar. And then they have primary producers that are similar. So if they're trees, then they're trees. If they're algae, then they're algae. And we talked about the rain shadow effect. We talked about some examples. With aquatic biomes, we talked about the photic zone and the aphotic zone. The top part of the ocean has sunlight, the first 200 or so meters, and below 200 meters is the aphotic zone. There's no light there at all. And we talked about the intertidal zone, pelagic zone, and benthic zone. Intertidal is between the high tide and low tide. Benthic zone is the bottom of the ocean. All right, that brings us to this section, which is titled Flow of Energy. Now, this is still under ecology, but it's a new subsection under ecology. It's flow of energy. Okay, so at the end of this, we should be able to talk about how living things are classified on how they obtain energy. We should be able to talk about food chains and food webs. And this particularly is very important. That is a specific standard in your state objectives for the 8th grade science EOG. So, yeah, we need to know this. Identify trophic levels and how they're related to energy and biomass. All right, so some vocabulary. Biomass, you may not have come across before, but you know, bio means life and mass means how much matter there is. So biomass is how much living stuff there is. Chemoautotroph. These are autotrophs that instead of using light to make food, they make food from chemicals. Chemosynthesis is the process that chemoautotrophs use. Consumer, we've talked about decomposer, and detritivore is new. Detritivore are things that eat the things that fall to the bottom of the floor. Detritus is the stuff that is left on the floor of the forest or the ocean or whatever. And so like dead leaves, twigs, whatever. Detritivores are something that they break that down. Okay, we also have food chain and food web. Photoautotroph, so they use photosynthesis. Producer, saprotroph, scavenger, and trophic level. All right, so let's get to the notes. All right, all things need energy. That should be obvious. Energy enters most ecosystems in the form of sunlight. So we need to know that. We call that process photosynthesis. Some ecosystems use chemical energy instead of sunlight, and we call that chemosynthesis. All right, so you should have that written down. You can pause the video, copy that down. All right, and then we're going to move on. All right, types of organisms and energy. Producers are either photosynthetic or chemosynthetic, and they make their own food. Okay, that's why they're called autotrophs. Troph means nutrient or food. Auto means self. So autotrophs make their own food. All right. Photosynthesis. Let's see. Let's go back. You kind of already have these definitions, so I'm not going to make you copy them again. Okay, photosynthesis uses sunlight to make sugars. Chemosynthesis uses the energy in chemicals to make usable energy. This would be some bacteria and archaea. Whoops. Consumers must consume other living things. These are called heterotrophs. All animals, all fungi, and some bacteria and protists are consumers. Okay? All plants are producers. They're autotrophs. Okay? Herbivores eat plants, carnivores eat animals, and omnivores consume plants and animals. Okay? Humans, crows, grizzly bears, we're all omnivores. Now, yes, some humans decide to only eat vegetables. Okay, but biologically, a vegetarian is still an omnivore. They have the ability to eat and digest meat. They just choose not to. Whereas a rabbit is an herbivore, a rabbit does not have the biological capability of breaking down meat. Okay, if you got a rabbit to eat steak, it wouldn't be able to break it down properly. Okay, decomposers. Let's see, I'm just going to have you write this. Okay, decomposers break down the waste of organisms or the remains of other organisms, and they return those nutrients back to the soil. Okay, so that's important. Producers then use these molecules to make new organic molecules. Right? Decomposers. Let's see here. Let's write decomposers are. And we'll there. Oops. Pardon me. There we go. Scavengers decompose dead animals. So think possum, maybe even a raccoon, hyenas, cockroaches. The trinivores decompose dead leaves, animal feces, other organic debris. Okay. Saprotrophs decompose organic matter left by other decomposers. Okay, so saprotrophs are the ultimate decomposers. They break down the things left by everybody else. Okay. All right, so again, pause if you need to, and then we'll move on. All right, modeling the flow of energy. All right, food chains and this. Sorry, all right, so modeling the flow of energy. Energy flows from the producers to consumers to decomposers. That's the general gist of things. Okay. Food chains and food webs help us model this flow. And one important thing, let's see here. I would write down that just so you know that we model the flow of energy with food chains and food webs. And then the arrow, this is very, very important. The arrow in a food chain or a food web always points from the thing being eaten to the thing that is eating the first thing. So it always points towards the consumer. So if it's grass and a rabbit, it's going to point from the grass to the rabbit. If it's a rabbit and a fox, it's going to point from the rabbit to the fox. Okay? We'll look at some examples. Okay? Food chains. Food chains show a single pathway energy flows through an ecosystem. They could be a terrestrial food chain or an aquatic food chain. And in some cases, you might have a mixture. For example, if this hawk up here, okay, decides to eat this fish, okay, that's a terrestrial and an aquatic food web or food chain. That's a question they like to ask on tests and things. Which of the following is a combination terrestrial and aquatic food chain? Okay, so that's what you look at. All right, let's see. Boom, 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 boom. Oh. Uh-oh. Oh. What in the world? There we go. All right, I'm not going to worry about this link. It's a applet or a flash thingy, and it's not working at the moment. All right, food webs. I just want to get the definitions down. All right, food webs are diagrams that represent many pathways through which energy flows through an ecosystem. So basically, it's a combination of multiple food chains. Food webs are much more realistic. Food chain, you only see one pathway. But we know that a hawk isn't just going to eat one thing. A hawk might eat a mouse, it might eat a rabbit, it might eat a fish. Okay, so it eats many things. So a food web is much more realistic. Okay, and food webs show that multiple things are eaten by multiple organisms. All right, so let's take an example here. All right, here you have an osprey. Now, according to this, the osprey only eats this large piscivorous fish. But then if we look at this small planktivorous fish, so it's a fish that eats plankton, okay, it's eaten by 3 different birds. If we look at this bald eagle, it might eat a duck or it might eat a fish. So it has 2 sources of food. Now, if we were comparing the osprey, that according to this food web only eats one thing, and a bald eagle that has 2 sources of food, which one is going to be most affected if this large piscivorous fish goes extinct? Okay, the osprey, right? Because the osprey only has 1 source of food in this ecosystem. That's another kind of question they like to ask. If we look at the bivalves here, the bivalves became extinct in this food web, then the sea ducks would be affected, so would the tundra swan. Okay, so they don't affect just one thing, they affect multiple things. All right, and we're going to stop here, I think, and we'll talk about this next time. Okay, so you'll have notes in class on trophic levels Wednesday. If you're B-Day watching this, well, B-Day took these notes in class, so they would just have the video as a backup in case they were absent or something. All right, I'll see you in class and stay curious.